Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we're recording. So it is great to be here, Zoe. I'm so excited about this.
I'm excited too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So for people who don't know me, I'm Bea Marshall and I'm the founder of Yes Parenting, and you are Zoe Foster and you are a life energy alchemist. And I'm just really excited about this kind of interviewing you now so that I can understand more about that, and also so that, you know, the people watching this interview can find out more about you, especially the members of my membership group, Yes Parenting for Happy Families, because you're coming in as our first guest expert, which is great. So just tell me, or tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. Because I know you're also a mom as well.
I am.
Yeah. Share who you are and what you do in a nutshell.
Okay, well, I'll try and keep it succinct. So, I'm a life energy alchemist, which means I basically, on two levels, I work with people on two levels. So, primarily, I help women in particular, because women are the people who struggle with this the most. To realign themselves with their energies, and that's all of their energies. And sometimes part of that process is actually discovering that they have a lot more energy hidden away in different parts of themselves than they actually realize or they give themselves credit for. And that has been one of the key parts of my own journey, which I'll go into in a little bit. But so it's unlocking all of those different kind of levels for themselves and realizing that in any given situation, there's always more energy. There's always more, you know? So that was just, it was mind-blowing for my own discovery process. It was absolutely mind-blowing. So I love to share that message now because as women and as parents in particular, it is so needed, needed.
And I mean, I remember when I first heard you talk about this idea, you know, that there's always more energy. Part of me went, what are you talking about? I've got no energy. Rah! And I kind of had this real resistance to it. And then this other part of me was like, there is? Well, where is it? And I remember when you put a free PDF out, and I just got completely caught up in the first point, which was about connecting with your physical energy and using that to, you know, and I've shared that video with me a couple of times of me being a crazy, silly little girl. But so there's two parts of your story that have really stood out to me. One is that you have a long history of health issues, which, you know, for many, many years, the doctors just threw all sorts of things left, right and center at you. And then you came to a key point of being like, enough. And then the other thing that has really stood out to me is you talked about part of that process of saying enough, I'm not going to keep using these meds, is that you then basically stopped sleeping and kind of lived in the bath. And that was kind of your eureka moment, this not sleeping and living in the bath. So can you share more of your story that's led to where you are now, and how that relates into the realm of being a mum as well? Because, you know, I'm at the point now where my boys are 10 and 11, and they're so independent. You know, they need me much less. But for all of the mums who are watching this who have got, you know, babies through, you know, those first kind of 5-6 years where your sleep is massively disrupted, and, you know, running around after maybe you've got a toddler, you've got a baby, you're doing a school run, you know, you've got all sorts of things going on. So I'd love to hear more of your story and how that really relates into what your experience of being a mum is.
Sure. Well, that's, I mean, there's, oh my goodness, there's so much packaged in there. So, basically, 3.5 years ago, I I stopped taking topical steroids for my eczema. And I've had eczema and asthma and chronic allergies and, you know, basically been really sickly ever since I was a baby. And I've been on medications, as you said, ever since. So that's like 6 years, basically. And yeah, so I stopped taking them 3.5 years ago because they were not working anymore. I kept going to the doctor. They were basically giving me more and telling me to use it more, and it was just getting worse. It was spreading, and so the key in terms of like my energy levels, just to give you a reference point, then and now, then I was sleeping about 12 to 14 hours a day on average. I needed that. If I got less, I could not function. And then I was needing to have naps in the afternoon as well, and quite often for, you know, 2 or 3 hours. So, and I needed it. I really, really needed it. And it was crazy because I didn't twig that was wrong or weird. You know, I put it down to, you know, our lifestyle, or the fact that we had small kids, the fact that, you know, we were nomads at the time. You know, it was just, I just thought, that's just the way it is. That's the way I am. And I was ill a lot of the time. And, you know, so I really tried to get my health in order. I was going to yoga a lot anyway, and doing all of that kind of stuff. And then I started training to be a yoga teacher. And I was doing, you know, I was kind of getting into raw food and like all of the kind of healthy eating, clean eating kind of lifestyle and so on. And it still wasn't making any difference. I was still exhausted like all the time. And it was when I went really, like you said, that key point was being in the bath in the middle of this healing crisis, because as soon as I stopped the topical steroids, I went into a very acute healing crisis.
Can you just, for anyone listening to this who has never heard this concept of a healing crisis, can you just share what, when you talk about going into a healing crisis, like what you actually mean?
Yeah, well, the body kind of breaks down to get better, essentially.
Okay.
That's it in a nutshell, is that it, you know, it looks and feels like everything's falling apart, and that you are, you know, I'm going to be really raw and honest here, is that at times I thought I was dying. I really did. And in fact, my organs, some of my organs, and especially my adrenals, did come very close to complete failure because of that. Basically, I took away what was keeping me on life support. It was a form of life support, and but unfortunately, that was the only way to really move through that. And obviously, I did it as mindfully and as compassionately as I possibly could at the time. But yeah, it was intense, and I did not sleep. I stopped sleeping until that point. I always thought that somebody who said that they suffered from insomnia was just not trying hard enough. And
take a moment to ask for forgiveness from all the insomniacs out there.
Absolutely. Well, I'm getting my payback now. So, excuse me. Yeah. And and it was lying in the bath night after night after night, not being able to sleep. When I realized not only was that not true, but that it was a very real problem for me. You know, I could not sleep. And I would, as a result, bearing in mind, I had 2 very small children at the time, so they were roughly 2 and 3. Obviously, it depended when exactly it was. And my husband was having to work, clearly, to support us. So I was left at home during the day with 2 very small children, and I was basically crashing out on them because I hadn't slept all night. So I would suddenly, you know, it was like narcolepsy. I would suddenly just absolutely go unconscious, and they would be left to fend for themselves, pretty much. And alongside all of that, obviously, I had a lot of negative emotions of guilt and shame and, you know, feeling like I just couldn't cope. And depression, severe depression, obviously, going with it. But, and here is the light, and this is why it's been such a transformational journey for me, is because it made me realize that what I thought of as my energy levels and my energy resources was not all that I had.
Okay.
And that my physical energy in particular was not all that I had. So, you know, clearly my physical energy was at a real low because of the lack of sleep, chronic lack of sleep. And like I said, it was lying in the bath, realizing and having that epiphany that I could draw on other sources to keep me going, and to not just on a physical level, but in terms of, you know, being emotionally there for my children, as well as myself, as well as my husband, and being able to cope with things like bills. And, you know, when you're chronically sleep deprived and you have children and you have an illness that you're having to look after, dealing with everyday life stuff is exhausting. You know, it's unbearable. And yet I somehow found those resources to do that.
I mean, in my experience, just being a mum of small children, you know, all of that life admin stuff is hard anyway. I mean,
it is.
Being an adult sometimes is just hard. But it's so interesting hearing you talk about this, because a lot of my journey with kind of developing yes parenting and my own kind of like personal growth is realizing how much what I think and what I believe and what I perceive affects how I experience reality.
Yes.
So, and what I'm hearing you say is that your kind of lying in the bath epiphany moment was this realization that, you know, actually, if you chose to allow your mind to open up, there were these other sources of energy available to you, rather than this, you know, previous kind of mindset that was, you know, I'm exhausted and I don't, you know, I'm not sleeping and I don't have energy. So I know you're going to go deeper into this in Parenting for Happy Families when you come as a guest expert. But can you just touch on what are these other sources of energy? Just touch on what they are now, because I know some people listening to this, because this is going to go up on YouTube, so some people are not in Yes Parenting for Happy Families yet.
Yeah.
And I would love for them to be able to take something away. And I would love for the members of Yes Parenting for Happy Families to kind of have this kind of like little introduction, so that they kind of are ready for when you turn up. So,
sure. Okay.
What are these other sources of energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it's looking at the 5 energy bodies in terms of, you know, this is my yoga training coming out, and those other energy bodies are. So we start with the physical, you know, and then we have the breath, which is the one that most people forget about. And yet I have to say that I would say that it's the most powerful of all the bodies of, you know, even in terms of like mindset, you know, mindset is a huge factor, which we'll come on to in a minute. But I'd say above mindset, above physical, above anything else, breath is the most powerful source of energy we can tap into, because it is directly connected with our life force, our prana. And it, you know, when we stop breathing, that's when we die. You know, but more than that, you can stir up your energies with the breath very easily. When I was lying in the bath, when I couldn't move, you know, I was huddled on the sofa, I couldn't move my body. I could still move my energies with the breath. I could still stir them up, and you know, all of that is also, it's moving the lymph system, which detoxes us. It it helps move all of the fluids in the body, which is all part of having that energy for ourselves. So if you can't physically move, you can still move the cells, you know, that life force. So the breath. Emotional. So this is really key in particular with being a parent.
Yes.
There's so much emotion wrapped up in being a parent, because not only is it your transformation to becoming that new person, it's like a birth,
right?
Becoming a parent, isn't it?
It's
you becoming this completely different person and having to think about maybe not just one other person, but several other people who all have their own personalities, who all have their own way of seeing the world already. It's the moment they're born,
right?
And you have to figure out how to deal with that emotionally, because there can be, I was talking to you just yesterday about this, there can be a lot of triggers there,
right?
That your children don't mean to set up for you, and yet they do.
Absolutely. But it's interesting, just on that, well, there were two things that come to mind hearing you talk about that, is I noticed that the language that we have become used to using in our culture is, my child is pressing my buttons. My child is pushing the boundaries. And actually your child has no clue about the buttons. Your child is just being who they are, and how you respond to them is about who you are. I find stuff like that very interesting. The other thing as well that I became very aware of when it came to energy was often the times when I used to lose my temper was the times when I felt like I didn't have the energy to deal with whatever was going on. So I would be trying to stay patient and calm, and then suddenly from out of nowhere, this like huge burst of energy would come and I would lose my temper. And I remember realizing once, like, well, I clearly do have the energy, because I have the energy to lose my temper.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, part of my journey with Yes Parenting was having this mindful awareness that actually when I feel in a situation like I don't have the energy to deal with this, reminding myself that, well, I know that I have the energy to lose my temper if I get to that point. So how do I bring that energy into this right now?
So that's definitely part of the emotional energy body, and there's lots of different ways that we can I kind of want to say manipulate, it's not really the right word, but do you know what I mean, is kind of manipulate maybe our approach to it in particular. So I'll give you one example right away, is just switching mindset. So for example, if you're in a situation where your kids are pressing all your buttons, and maybe the situation is very fraught, it's very tense, and this is something you probably already do.
Sorry for the dog.
It's okay. It's just switching it up into a different mindset. And you can do this consciously. It's hard. It can really, really take a lot of perseverance to kind of get into. But when you're in that situation, you're recognizing the triggers. You think, right, I'm gonna change this for all of us, and I'm gonna move into the mindset or the emotional kind of response of love and play and compassion instead.
Absolutely.
And it sounds very simple, but there are little things that you can do that really help you to do that as well. So and it's so powerful. Just switching in that moment, it changes everything for you and your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you've heard me talk about this within Yes Parenting, that kindness and compassion has never hurt anybody. And we get so caught up in the middle of a situation, kind of thinking that somehow we need to control and manage our child's behavior or their development so that they're going to grow up to be this adult. And actually, the most powerful thing we can do is actually to step back and come into that place of compassion towards them and reconnect with, how much we love them. And from that place, be kind. And it's so powerful.
And also from an energetic point of view, negative emotions are incredibly draining. They're the most
Right.
draining thing that you can do, basically. You could run a marathon, but if you had that positive, you know, that's how people run marathons, right?
Right.
They've got the positive, the adrenaline. You know, if somebody was really grumpy, they wouldn't be able to get through that marathon, would they? You know? So negative emotions of all kinds are incredibly draining. So the moment that you switch out of that for you and your children, it's like cleaning the slate energetically, you know, and you're starting to refill that well for all of you. So yeah.
So we've just got 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Because
I'll just quickly say, so the last two bodies are the intuitive body. So really getting into starting to trust yourself more. And then the spiritual body, which is essentially being appreciative and thankful and seeing yourself as part of a greater connectedness. And yeah, I'll go into those more during the week.
So it's the physical energy, the breath energy, the emotional energy, the intuitive energy, and the spiritual energy.
That's right, yeah.
So in the last 2 minutes, no pressure, Zoe Foster, Energy Alchemist, but speaking to mums in particular, and I think especially those with small children, because I know that is probably the most challenging season of parenthood. What would you say to them in these last 2 minutes of how they can begin to take steps towards changing their energy to support them as parents of very young children?
Wow. Okay. So I would have to say that the first thing is really just becoming aware of how you respond in any situation, even if your children aren't there. I feel that I find that, you know, I can find myself feeling really, really exhausted. Just at the thought of some of the things that I have to do, you know, so just thinking about, I've got to do the washing, I've got to make their dinner, I've got to do their beds, when they come home they've got to have a bath, and I just feel like, oh my god, I don't want to do any of it, I'm exhausted.
Yes, I can relate to that as well.
So first of all, it's becoming aware of that, and aware of what your automatic responses are. And then when you start to become aware of those automatic responses, you can actually begin to do something about them. You know, you can look at them analytically and say, okay, right, I really need to do something about that, because that's not serving me or my children. And it's very easy to get stuck in victim mode, obviously. You know, it's very easy to get stuck in that, oh my god, I'm a martyr to my children mode. But that, like I said, that's not serving you. It's not enlivening you.
Right.
You know, most of us had children for a reason. We want them in our lives. You know, we want to be able to enjoy them. So it's also about tapping into that why as well. You know, why have you got this family? What are you grateful for about this family? What do you really want out of this family, you know, and of this family life? And having that bigger picture for yourself, so that when you get stuck in those moments, and I know that for myself, sometimes I will get stuck in those moments and I won't want to move. I'd be like, I don't want to work on this right now. I don't want to be a better parent. I just want to be grumpy. But that's when you bring in the bigger picture of, you know, what you really want and why you have this beautiful family. And brilliant. I think that's probably my 2 minutes. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm really looking forward to welcoming you into Yes Parenting for Happy Families as our guest expert. And
I'm excited.
Going deeper into this with me and, you know, all the other mums that are in there. And it's just really great to have done this interview with you and to know that we can share this publicly and, you know, see where it goes. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank
you.
Bye,
Zoe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.